I was planning to do a bit of introduction on Project Promissa, but you've heard it already so many times that I will directly introduce my colleagues Patrick and Divya from the World Bank that will share more about this project. So over to you.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Washington, D.C. On behalf of the World Bank, really we're privileged to introduce this great project that, and thank you, Hyung and Niraj, to kind of give us a great opening. It is a very interesting project that came from prototype into reality. So I hope I'm blocking everybody here. It is called Project Promissa. So we came up a little bit of our own twist. It's digitizing development promises. And together with my teammate, Divya Garg, we're co-lead on this project. We're part of the World Bank Treasury. So as you know, the World Bank, we're owned by 189 member countries, almost like a cooperative in a sense. My team sits in Treasury Department, where we basically work with all the stakeholders to see if technology can really help make our transaction more and more efficient. Okay, if it works. Do it this way. Thank you. Maybe I'll step back to talk everybody about how we are funded. So many MDB like ourselves are funded almost the same way. We are actually mainly here, a lot of our member countries are here, stakeholders. We're actually, thank you for all your contributions to us. We have contribution from the members in cash or promissory note, but we also are funding it through borrowings by itself. And I know Niraj mentioned that we are also exploring tokenization on the digital world, and we're very proud to be a partner with a lot of the market infrastructure to do almost 3 or 4 digital bonds in the market. So that's covering on the borrowing side. On the contribution side, Promissa is the project that we're talking about. All these money comes into doing all the capacity building, grants, concessional lending, other lending products, and of course reinvest all these money just to make sure that we can recycle this back into loan repayments and also other administrative expenses and also technical assistances. Thank you, it works. So maybe let me zoom in a little bit what promissory note is. And we'll have a little video that will probably explain it in better ways than I can ever do that. But we basically come from an IDA perspective. Of course, the World Bank is owned by 5 different groups. IDA is the International Development Association, which is lending to the poor nations. We have donor countries that act as donors or subscribers to this agency, and they come in cash or promissory notes. So you see below there's 2 bars, IDA 20 and IDA 21. So it means the 20th replenishment or the 21st replenishment. On the 20th replenishment that was done a few years ago, we had almost 25 billion worth of contribution coming in as cash or promissory notes, and almost 60% of that number is in a promissory note form. And it's very interesting, it's 59, almost 59 of about the 189 countries that are coming in. Looking forward to IDA 21, which is happened last year, but again, this annual meeting will give us more indication of how much of that split of 23.7 billion in cash or promissory note contribution, how it's going to be kind of allocated in a sense. So what does it mean for us? It means that this promissory note is not going to go away. We need to have some way to digitize and basically tokenize this as much as we can. Now, looking at this overall map, this represents both our entities, IBRD and IDA. IBRD is our main entity, and IDA is our sister entity. It covers all around the world, and of course, the gray out part doesn't mean that they didn't contribute. They usually contribute in cash, but this is the promissory note usage. In our understanding, there are actually certain European countries, these notes that sits in the vault. And they are taken out every time that you process and stamp and whatnot. And there's one country that even put this note through a highway to move between cities. So you can understand how manual and how paper-based it is. In some of our Caribbean nations, some of these notes sit in the vault, but they don't have their own central bank. They sit with the commercial bank, but again, exposed with the commercial risk. Sometimes these needs to be transferred whenever there is insolvencies and whatnot. And then we had a case that we had to find it just to make sure it didn't get lost. So it calls for a need for really to do something about this. Maybe then zooming in a little bit more, there's really these four corners of the promissory note management. Let me maybe strip it down a little bit. The promissor, which is the person that gives the promissory note, usually is the country's Ministry of Finance. The promisee, the World Bank, or another set of IFI agencies, MDBs. There's usually a paying agent called, it could be the central bank or a commercial bank that acts in its capacity. And there's also a persona called the custodian. Typically, the custodian and the paying agent are usually the same set of actors with the central bank, but we have a lot of cases where the country doesn't have a central bank. It actually splits, and even in countries that have central bank, they like to split their work into two just to make sure the check and balance are in place. So the flow here is one, whenever a promissory note is created, it's created by the promissor, give it to the promisee, and it's deposited to whatever entity that acts as the commercial bank, the custodian and the paying agent. And this is a flow where things happen whenever it gets in cash. So typically a note is in perpetuity. They don't have a set maturity date, but the encashment can be any time, but usually in a 6-month and an annual basis. So when you look at this flow, it is really predominantly paper-based, slowing down a little bit of the operations, and we're looking at right now digitization in the private world. How can we actually speed that up? And it's really a call to the G20 of us being more efficient as best as we can. Management of these promissory notes is quite cumbersome and time-consuming. And when you see there's 4 players, right, 4 corners, data are actually kind of fragmented. And we spend a lot of time talking to each other just to make sure we're after the same amounts and when we're in cash. And typically these amounts are coming into large sums in the millions every time we settle, and we use a traditional rail. So maybe let me pause here and maybe show a video, and this is a great work that is done by our BIS colleagues. We actually worked through phase 1 with them since a year and a half ago. We just completed this March and April with the report, and this is a video that we did together. So maybe we'll give you a minute.
Today's financial system is highly digital, enabling trillions of dollars to be traded, cleared, and settled daily. Building on this, there are exciting opportunities to further improve efficiency and streamline processes by moving from paper and manual methods to more automated solutions. The Bretton Woods Agreement established the World Bank in 1944 to promote economic growth and prevent instability. Over time, regionally focused development banks emerged, such as the Asian Development Bank. Since inception, these multilateral development banks have been funded in part by commitments from member countries, recorded on paper, known as promissory notes, a method mostly unchanged and unchallenged for decades. What is a promissory note? A promissory note is a written promise made by a member country to pay a specific sum as part of its contributions to a multilateral development bank by a future date. Today, these promissory notes involve 3 distinct parties: the government or Ministry of Finance, which issues the note, the Multilateral Development Bank, which receives it, and a central bank, which acts as the custodian. This current paper-based setup requires physical handling, frequent messaging through various channels, and repetitive reconciliations, resulting in a time-consuming and cumbersome process. To address these issues, we introduce Project Promissa, a digital initiative designed to reimagine the management of promissory notes. The project is a collaboration between the Swiss Center of the BIS Innovation Hub, the Swiss National Bank, and the World Bank, with the IMF participating as an observer. Project Promissa uses distributed ledger technology to tokenize promissory notes, automating manual processes and reducing time and costs. Tokenized promissory notes enable a shared single source of truth for all participants, and smart contracts with multi-party signatures ensuring speed, consistent messaging, and efficient reconciliation-free management of the promissory notes throughout their life cycle. This delivers significant benefits. There's no need for reconciliation, and it provides real-time data availability. Multi-party signatures automate and accelerate lifecycle management. Confidentiality. Access is restricted to involved parties only. And sovereignty. Full control over promissory notes is ensured. The project demonstrates technical feasibility and generated strong interest through engagement with central banks, ministries of finance, and multilateral development banks. We tested Project Promissa with partners worldwide, demonstrating how distributed ledger technology can support multilateral development banks in their mission to improve the world. With Project Promissa, the future of promissory note management is tokenized, secure, and efficient.
Check. All right, thank you, Patrick. And following that video, before I start, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Divya Garg, a part of World Bank Treasury Financial Technology team and co-leading Project Promissa. So far, we saw what the concept of promissory notes looks like through this prototype, and I'm here to speak about what the technology was that was used at the prototype level. Underpinning Project Promissa was the Canton protocol that formed the base layer. And through this visual representation, you'll see at the center where we've got a synchronizer node that kind of looped all through the various web of networks that was there. And surrounding the synchronizer node is a set of participant nodes which brings together the multilateral development banks such as the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank. And on the other side, we've got the country participating networks. At the country level, this brings together a further internal layer of distinction between the ministries of finance and the central banks. This synchronizer node is important because it captures the life cycle of events through the promissory notes while maintaining data sovereignty. That is to say, who can issue a note, who can encash it, who can approve it, who can archive it, while maintaining the distinctive levels of approval as are followed in the current process. The platform brought together a couple of features, but I'd like to highlight 3 of them. The first one is slightly obvious, where it creates a single source of truth, where all the parties to the transaction look at the same ledger, thereby looking at the same information, which eliminates the need for reconciliation, which previously took a couple of weeks of back and forth, and now it's instant. The second being in terms of data sovereignty, and this aspect is something which is important to the participating member countries to ensure that the roles which are currently followed distinctive between the ministries of finance and the central bank continue to be followed, and that segregation of duties continues to be maintained. The third piece being the confidentiality and integrity piece, where all the features that distributed ledger technology offers in terms of being immutable and creating an auditable record are benefited through this process. While this design was developed for the prototype, this lays the blueprint of what we will look to create as we think of moving towards a minimum viable product in the next stage. We touched upon this briefly in the video, but to speak about the core members which participated in the phase 1 prototype, this was initially set up as a tri-party between the Swiss Center of the Bank of International Settlements Innovation Hub, of course the World Bank Group, and the Swiss National Bank, with the IMF acting as an observer. We did extend the prototype to a group of 6 countries globally to ensure that there was jurisdictional considerations that were taken into account at the testing stage. So we did partner with Austria, with Georgia, with Germany, with Saudi, with India to ensure that not just the individual processes that were followed at the regional level, but also some of the legal considerations were taken into account. Because as we think of creating a minimum viable product, scalability will be one of the key aspects that we will be looking at. From the Multilateral Developmental Bank's perspective, we partnered also with the Asian Development Bank so as to ensure that when we consider the scalability aspects, it's scalable not just with the member countries, but also in the IFI community. So what did we learn from this prototype? The first thing, again, an obvious one, but the fact that distributed ledger technology works for this specific class of financial instruments, promissory notes, which are not the most commonly used form of instruments, but the fact that this layer can be used for this particular class of instruments, and the fact that it can eliminate the need for holding instruments in the paper form and reduce a lot of the manual burden around reconciliation. We also learned here that the fact that co-design matters, because this prototype brought together different players, right from the promissor, the promisee, the custodian of the promissory note workflow, which ensured that real pain points that are experienced by each of these parties are addressed through the prototype. Currently, the prototype is built to scale, but as we think of the minimum viable product, we are looking to enhance considerations around the framework and the legal aspects to ensure that a maximum number of participants could benefit from this platform. And that actually leads us to think about what the next steps would be in terms of the prototype. Now that we've got the report for the phase 1 out and published, we're thinking of in terms of the minimum viable product to enhance the framework around the governance, which will also involve partnering once again with the Bank for International Settlements to co-lead an RFP, which will include vendor selection to engage with key market intermediaries such as the ICSDs. In terms of the scalability, we are also looking to expand our network from the 6 testing participants plus Switzerland to ensure that some of the legal considerations that could be existing, like Patrick mentioned, in some of the Caribbean countries are taken into account. And perhaps further out into the horizon is once we've got this network up and running through the minimum viable product, it also lays the plumbing and the framework for any other bilateral financial agreements which exist between these 3 parties. So that was a brief, I think, introduction on what we worked on in the prototype and what we aim to achieve in terms of the next steps. But before we share a couple of resources to take back, we'd also like to share that beyond the scope of the prototype, the project has received recognition from the GBBC, where this project was quoted amongst the 101 real-world blockchain use cases, and which was very recently, the book was included to the Library of Congress. This was also cited in Citibank's digital dollar publications as one of the use cases which brings together banks and public sector blockchain adoption. From the internal World Bank perspective, we're also happy to share that the project has received recognition from the World Bank Group's president in terms of its innovation awards, which solidify the senior leadership support and institutional backing to this project as these initiatives are hosted by the president himself, Mr. Ajay Banga. So we've got a few QR codes here in case anyone else would like to look into a little bit of the details for the report. We've got QR codes for the full report, but in case you'd prefer a slightly more succinct version, we've got a 2-page case study as well, and the video which Patrick just played. But if you'd like the most quickest version, I think it's to connect with Patrick and me. I think we're going to have a coffee break right after this session, so we're happy to connect with anyone who'd like to know a little more. Thank you.